let's continue.
So Lynn, go ahead. Let's give us something else here to chew on.
Yeah, I love
Let me
that
say
story, by the
this.
way. It was great, Chris.
That was awesome.
I love it.
Good food for thought.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I will say this. I mean, I personally feel in that case you're dealing with a story in a case here that involves just strongly on the belief of could this be possible? And you all bring up very good points. And it's important because as researchers and more importantly as podcasters, we always have these little debates on what could possibly be this. And if anything, the whole Dogman theory is debate because we don't know for sure what's what, because we still have a lot of questions to ask, because we don't know really what's going on in the field, because there's just too much, and we can only run by theory, but I feel that there's just way too many running around. And I'm not someone to get controversial. I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm just simply saying that I feel that for us to do what we believe, but at the same time know that it's just opinion, but we can only go by so much data. That's why it's important to go out there and get more data. And one of the things I do on my show is this Dogman States. And the state episodes I do is I tend to do these for a few reasons. First reason is because I want to get more data, and I also want to reach out to people who've had encounters. But these encounters, of course, if they've never talked about them or it's something brief, and but it's still data because it connects all dots to certain locations and it showcases where they are located, how far they are apart from each other, and then more importantly, what resources are around the environments. That's why they keeps them there, whether it's certain nutrients or there's more prey or livestock location, which currently right now I'm working on an episode in Kentucky, and there's a brief part where I talk about mutilations on farms. And I think in many of the cases that I've collected, and I'm not going to try to get gory here, but I'm going to simply just say this, that when you guys probably hear about when Sasquatch kill an animal, you've probably heard of times where they've snapped the necks, and other times they've probably gotten a little violent. But then they hear cases of dogmen and animal mutilation. There's this case in Kentucky that happened nearly almost a decade ago involving a woman who had went outside one morning and saw her horses brutally slashed and goats' tongues were ripped out of their mouths and stuff, and they were sliced open and stuff. It was a very brutal case. And when it comes to dogmen, I feel sometimes in many cases that we could be dealing with something that is not normal. I'm sure you guys have thought that too. Like, do you guys think that when they're like that, or if that's the case, is this a typical dogman behavior of a flesh and blood, or do you feel it would be more along the lines of something supernatural, like demon wise?
I mean, you can look at it through either lens. You could look at it through the lens of supernatural. You could look at it through the lens of the physical here and now. Supernatural, I would say in case such as the one you mentioned that happened a decade ago over there in Kentucky, had I'd have to ask the questions. Had this person been having lots of supernatural, for, I guess, to use layman's terms, a lot of ghost paranormal stuff like that activity happening on the property before this, right? And if the answer is no, then to me, it'd be hard for me to consider that if she hadn't had it. But then that would have me look on the other side, the physical part, and knowing what we know now, and there's probably many locals in that area who've lived near where this lady that had that her horses torn up, right? There's probably many locals around there that's lived there for a long, long time, could probably tell you stories about what they've seen out in and around their property or when they go out hunting. And so I would lean to the side of the physical. And with that, I'd say, it could be that they were, they're trying to send a message. Say, hey, get out of here. We're tired of you being here. That's a potential, because going on displaying that human level intelligence. they could be having that type of forethought.
I I think it'd be interesting to actually be able to talk to the people around there
Yeah, that
and
would be
see if
real.
what they've seen, because I know when I was working out by the lake, there was a horse. There's a horse ranch that was not far out there, and a couple of the horses got just tore up.
Right.
And I remember the lady was talking to one of the people that lived out in the property where I was guarding, and she was saying that there was no way that that was a mountain lion. She said that the canine, the tracks were very canine. And at that time, I remember telling my cousin and my brother that we were working out there, that what is that? That's very weird. And I know Scorpion was kind of spooked at that time because he was hearing noises out in the woods, and he was like, "I don't want to be out here," because he didn't have a vehicle.
Right. Oh,
At that time, he was like, "I don't want to be out here because what is this?" Because we all were very aware that Dogman existed, and I don't think this lady had any clue. And of course, me being in a professional setting, I didn't go, "Ma'am, you're dealing with a dog, man. I know all about these creatures. Let me tell you, I saw one back in 19." And then she would be like, "You need to fire that guy because he's crazy." So I didn't say anything about it, but in my mind, Chris, I'm looking at my guys and they're looking at me and we're making faces. As soon as she left, you know, she was distraught, and I didn't tell our client either, "You know what I think you're dealing with," because I just wasn't going to do that. But we all had talked about it, and we were like, "That's got to be something." And we were hearing very weird noises out there at that time. We were seeing things and hearing things, and nobody saw a dog man per se, but we heard things and we smelled things, and everybody was a lot. It was kind of spooked, and they were passing out flyers. The sheriff's department, I believe, was passing out flyers blaming a coyote. I believe they were saying it was coyotes that
mhm.
were snatching up animals, and I'm going like, because of the canine tracks.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that that's what that was. I think that it was something else.
Yeah.
You know,
Speaking about that particular incident, Josh, I'm thinking coyotes are not that big. The
no,
biggest they get 60. If you get a good sized coyote that's like oversized for a coyote, you may get 70 pounds.
even coy wolves, and we have them
Yeah,
out here
yeah, and
now.
we
They're
have
down
coils,
here.
but to take on a full sized horse,
Horse, even a
it's
pack of them wouldn't do that. I mean,
no, you and even if they did, you'd be able to see the size. You'd be able to
this was
see
a
the size of the
mother. I
ribs.
mean, I'm sorry, not a mother. What do
A
you call it? A
mare
mare and a colt.
and a
Like
colt, yeah.
a
Now
foal or
they
whatever.
would take the colt before they would
Yeah,
even
but
think about messing with the
I
mare.
think she was defending it, and
Uh-huh.
whatever it was, just tore her up,
Oh
and they
wow.
had to put her down, and they just found her like with one leg just hanging, like. So
Hmm.
it was large, and the tracks, according to this woman, because I heard it from her mouth, that it was canine because you could see the claws on there,
Right.
the pads. You don't see the claws on a cat.
No, you don't. They
And of
retract
course,
them.
we got a lot of big cat sightings out here too,
Yeah,
and I'm
we do.
talking large big cats, not little like a panther,
Or a
puma.
bobcat.
No, no, no. Not only even talking about a jaguar. I'm talking about people seeing them the size of Toyotas. Like, I mean, that's another cryptid we have down here. People claim to see these oversized large black cats.
Hmm.
People claiming to see them walk on two legs. But this woman was pretty adamant that it wasn't. She was supposed to come back and show tracks. I was not there when she returned, so it was just the owner of the property, and of course I didn't push the issue with the owners of the property and be like, "Hey man, you got a werewolf running around out here," because they're gonna think I'm off of my rocker, and then I'm probably gonna be out of a job. So I just kept my mouth shut, and I didn't speculate with them. But there was a little bit of fear going on, at that time. And of course, this was well over a decade ago, but what was it? I mean, we don't know. We're left to speculate. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen this before. I had a friend of mine whose parents were raising sheep out near Giddings,
Hmm.
and something had just slaughtered them all in one night. And I remember my friend's stepmom actually using the words demonic,
Wow.
because she was like, I don't know that she was saying a demon rose up out of the ground or flew from the sky or something and delivered the death blow to these sheep. But she said the way that she worded it was almost like, she's like, it was some demonic entity that did this, because it like took bites out of the different animals, like it
Hmm.
chewed them, and then of course the sheriff's department, I think, is who dealt with it, and they said, I think what they had said to my friend's dad and his stepmom was that it was that they had been killed, eaten partially and then scavenged later, possibly.
Right.
But it happened in one night, so I don't know. It just didn't sound right
How
to
many
me.
were there?
I think there were like 30 of them.
Oh,
Like, and it just happened, and then of course, they didn't want to, tell them they were telling them, oh, we'll deal with this. Don't speak about it and scare people, which I thought was odd that they were asking them not to make people panic or whatever,
mhm.
because, and of course it would put undue pressure on the sheriff's department because then the neighboring ranches and farms are going to be calling saying, hey,
We got issues.
we got something coming out here. And
Yeah.
of course they're going to be watching and being freaking out. Well, it happened again like a week later on a farm, not too far away. And of course, that's when they began to say, hey, that there is something going on here. People aren't just going to sit back and accept it. I mean, this was 15 years ago, probably.
Yeah, they saw a pattern. I mean, once you see a pattern, that's when you have to take a hard look because if it's an isolated incident, I can understand sheriff's departments and all them not wanting people to make a big stink about it. But if you got single incidents that have a lot of the same elements within these incidents, right? These individual incidents having the same, that's going to raise an eyebrow. And about 20, 30 sheep in one night, I would have to say that if it was a pack of coyotes, it was a huge, huge pack. And I've never heard of a huge pack of 40, 50, 60 coyotes in one area. That's just because it takes something like that.
That same area,
Uh-huh.
that same corridor, there was an incident, I should say, an incident that
Mhm.
I believe might have been Sasquatch related,
Right.
involving a red-eyed creature. Did not have a snout, as far as I was told. It was not. It was probably about 10 years ago. I remember hearing about this.
Mhm.
2007. Oh man, I'm way off. 12 years ago. Woo, I'm getting old. Okay, 2 years just went by like that. Boom. It was 10 years ago or 12 years ago. I'm sorry. And I remember that specifically because it was right around the same time that I had just moved, and I was actually looking at purchasing property out away from the Austin area because I was sick of the traffic, and it's gotten even worse. But
Mhm.
there was somebody that had given me a story about Bigfoot in that area, and of course that goes from that Bastrop, like cross to that whole Giddings, Bastrop, Elgin.
Southeastern region
Yeah, that's like
of
heading
Austin.
from here. That's heading east toward
Southeast,
Houston.
east, southeast. Yeah.
Yeah, it's midway between us and Houston,
Yeah.
which is like Brenham, all
Yes.
that whole corridor. There's a lot of weird stuff that's happened out there. Bigfoot sightings have been in that area because it's very rural, very rural. They're just there's a lot of little small communities and no major towns. I think Brenham's the biggest town out there.
Yes, it is
Yeah,
until you hit Houston.
until you hit Houston, and there's nothing there.
There's
I think there's
nothing.
Prairie View.
And that's one thing I wanted to just throw out there to you, Chris, and as well as the listeners. And I know we've probably said it before in previous episodes that when you take the major cities in Texas, if you were to mash them all together into one big giant, city, if you will, you'd be surprised at how much rural land there is in the rest of the state. It's ungodly. A lot of people think it's desert. It's not. We've got different types of landscapes. We got thick forests in the east. We got swampy areas down in the southeast. In the central area, you've got a mixture of lots of woods and rolling hills. Once you start getting out to West Texas, out and around the Big Springs area, that's when you have more of the desert that people think, like
Past
they
Big
see.
Springs, I think even.
Yeah,
It gets kind of brushy.
yeah, that's where you see that's where you
lot of
can think of those
mesquite.
you get a lot of mesquite, but that's
Tumbleweeds.
also think of the tumbleweeds. Yeah, that's when
Going
you
west.
think going west out there. But once you get out near El Paso, you've got the Davis Mountains out there.
Yeah,
It's
then it
basically
becomes a little
Yeah.
Chinati Mountains and Marfa
yeah,
and the Big Bend National Park's very beautiful. But this area that we're talking about to the east of Austin is very thickly wooded.
it's that anomaly, the Lost Pines.
That's Bastrop. But if
Yeah.
you get toward Giddings in that area, you start to run into like a lot of pasture, not a lot of farmland, I would say, but a lot of
Just rough ranch land. out
ranch
there.
land out there. But there's a lot of trees,
A lot of cedars.
a lot of oak too.
And too, yeah.
Oak, cedar, mesquite, and so you have a lot of area out there where these things can roam. And I know that there was some ranchers that claimed to be seeing a black hairy creature, about 7 foot tall, but it had a flat face. It didn't have a snout, so
Yeah.
that tells me Bigfoot. and that it would they believed that it was responsible for the butchering of these animals.
Quite possibly.
But it had red eyes because everybody that reported on it was saying that it had red eyes. But I got a firsthand account from someone that I worked with, and who was telling me, that his uncle out there had seen it himself. And so, I don't know what to make of that. I know that when I spent some time up in Oregon and Washington, that there were a lot of people that I worked with and stuff that said they would see these Bigfoot, Sasquatch creatures, and that they looked very menacing, very big, very large, but that typically if you left them alone, they would leave you alone. That's what they would say. But the ones that we get down here in Texas, for whatever reasons,
It's like they got an attitude.
they got an attitude or something. Like, they're very cantankerous, dude, and they'll throw things at people. The Dogman here, they're very. I wouldn't
Pretty much the same way. Cantankerous.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify them as mischievous. Some people have used that word, and I'm thinking, yeah, you're full of crap, because that's when you're throwing rocks in people's windshields and you're yanking on people trying to get them out of cars and stuff. That's not mischievous. That's
aggressive.
aggressively vicious. Yes, and so yeah, and we've gotten reports, and of course, Chris, I talked to you off air about something that happened to someone that I was not at liberty to tell that story, at least not as of yet. But that is an example of the kind of reports that you get. Some of these things that happen here, like the sheep or whatever being killed, like what you were saying about these animals being slaughtered in Kentucky,
Mhm.
that's what you're getting. I mean, you're getting reports of these things being, just downright nasty.
Yeah, it's very. I guess if you're going to make a comparison, you could look at it in terms of look at all the Native American tribes in history. Let's just for the purpose of just putting a number out there. Let's say there was over 100 major Native American tribes. Well,
And he's not saying that that's all there is. You're
no,
saying
not saying
that, yeah,
just for
just for
a number.
argument's sake, let's put a
Yeah.
number on it.
Yeah,
100 of them, yeah. And
yeah. You're going to have two ends of the spectrum. You're going to have the highly
peaceful
aggressive ones. You're going to have ones that are going to be peaceful.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we can't discount that about these creatures who are displaying human level intelligence not to be the same way. I mean, we even have animals that are not Africanized honeybees, for one, versus the regular honeybees we have in Texas. We haven't heard a whole lot about it lately, but that was a big issue in Texas for many years. People worrying about Africanized honeybees.
Well, a lot of people are you saying that's a Mandela effect too, is how it just stopped.
Yes,
Like, there was like all these murders. I guess bees murder people. They kill people.
the
But they were
attacks by
killing all
bees.
these people, and then all of a sudden it just stopped.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, oh, well, the African honeybees are no longer a problem. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know how that happened, but it just seemed like it just stopped. What you're saying about the tribes, though,
Yeah.
we had probably one of the most aggressive and warlike tribes in the history of all of North America right here, the Comanches.
The Comanches, yeah.
They were pretty much responsible for genociding a lot of the other tribes. And of course, a lot of people believe archaeologically that they were the reason that the Aztecs just kind of kept going.
Kept going south.
Yeah, when they came into Texas, they were like, we're not going to settle here. So they just kept going because the Comanches were so dang mean
and aggressive.
And once they got horses, then it just became worse. But, even prior to that, before they were a horse people, the Nermani were known as a very
warlike
and just very dark people. They just were very warlike, and they did not tolerate others in their land. And, of course, I'm actually part Comanche myself, but the thing is, I know that a lot of the legends and stories of the Comanches do revolve around, there being other types of creatures besides the everyday what we see. And of course, if they are as mean and aggressive as they seem to be, then a people that would live amongst them would have to be that way too.
Yeah, they'd have to be aggressive and
you would
hardy
have to be tough and hardy.
Mhm.
But Chris, go ahead and continue with any other stories or accounts or whatever. I'm sorry that we got too far off on the. I'm sure that we'll get lambasted by the listeners for talking too much.
Well, I did want to ask Chris a question and hopefully segue into his next his next story or experience or hypothesis. Chris, as far as up there in the area where you live at, how much
are you paying for gas?
What's, as far as, I guess you could say, quantity, how much do you hear as far as reports regarding the Dogman or man wolf? I prefer to say man wolf. I think I'm going to start saying that. Man wolf.
Well, in the Pennsylvania region where I reside, I have a from the East Coast portion, a very huge number, or at least what is to be a good renaissance for report. But the big thing is that even though that you have all these reports on the East Coast, there's not a lot booming through the course of all throughout. Like there's a few in Pennsylvania region close to Pittsburgh where I reside versus a little bit in the New Jersey region, especially in the Pine Barrens area. Now, I advise everyone who is curious of the Pine Barrens to check out the Pine Barrens because the Pine Barrens is a very interesting area and a lot to offer. And even the locals there, they know what's going on necessarily. So it's pretty interesting. But nonetheless, the reports are average. I mean, I would say more or less that they're not, it's not like active. There's mostly stuff going down South PA. And then you also have just a series of events with just various other reports when it comes to your typical upright canine running around and much like the whole scenario. There was an interesting case though involving an individual who was he couldn't give away his information, but he was a former state trooper.
Oh,
And you got to remember too, Jersey to Philadelphia, it's connected, so it's not that far from too apart from each other. So when
yes.
you're going into the Pennsylvania region, you can drive anywhere, even for a state trooper. Obviously, if you're in the same district and same region, but this one state trooper, he happened to be speaking to a guy who happened to have an encounter not too far from Sussex County, New Jersey. Now, what happened was that this individual, he was driving home and he happened to he stopped by this occurrence happened in the 90s, and he happened to go ahead and he was driving down. It was in Sussex County. The location specifically not allowed to be talked about, but it is close to a forest area. So connection dot wise, it's not too far. Um, but other than that, he was driving alongside this road. Now the road's pretty narrow, so instantly you can see something from 50 feet away, especially depending on how quick it is. So this creature is on the side of the road. He doesn't even know what to do really because if anything, he thinks it's a guy in a costume.
So this is
But
the former trooper seeing this, right?
correct,
Okay,
correct.
got it.
But this is being told from a guy that I spoke to, and this is his friend.
Oh,
So I just
okay. I
want to
got you.
clarify that. I
Okay.
may have miscommunication right there, but this trooper had seen this, and he was almost like it was like surprised in a sense because again, when you're working for the law enforcement, you know that you have to like you can't second guess things depending on how you see it with law, and it could be a guy in a costume. But
Yes.
this trooper was just not, he felt very conflicted. He didn't feel like it would be a smart thing to do to get out of the car. So he just slowly drives, but the creature sees him, and then the creature just runs across the side of the road and then just runs into like the forest ditch area.
Yeah.
But but the point is that this guy, even though that he felt it was very unnerving, we mentioned earlier when when I mentioned that I was pretty unnerved when I went to the Barrens.
Right.
He he felt that sense too, but he felt like he kind of connected to it because he locked eyes onto it. And for the second he saw it, and this is a trooper. He at any given time he was able to pull out a weapon. He could easily if he wanted to, but he looked at this thing and it just literally stared at him. And for a sense he thought for a second that he was like, this thing is very much so like it's a this animal, it's not a man. this is something not even man. It's an animal of some sort, but it looked like it could easily kill me. Is literally how he described it, and he just mentioned that it was just like locking eyes with it. He felt that it was the wrong thing to do, but once it crossed the road, he just drove out of the area. And I don't know if he stayed with the force after that. I know he was still pretty active, but when I found this out, I was curious because it was very interesting how a lot of law enforcement who talk about these type of cases, they're not really giving testimony because I'm pretty convinced that there is a belief that they know about them. But that's just my own 2 cents onto it. I could be very wrong, but that was a case that was just kind of startling to me because heard a few reports of how people can sense that connection with a dogman when you're kind of lock eyes, but you know it's a smart animal and something that it could do a lot of damage to.
Yes.
That that's something that there have been cases where I've heard people felt so very uncomfortable, but know that this thing is a lot stronger and could do a lot of damage if it chose to.
That's really quite interesting. The fact that he locked eyes and he sensed that this thing had an intelligence is, I mean, that's what I'm taking from this, that he sensed there was he could see the power, due to the size and all the weapons it brings to the fight, for lack of better words. He could see that right there without a doubt, but then connecting, the eye to eye connection. I mean, I know I've heard of reports from people locking eyes with them and they saw an intelligence in them that was beyond that of a dog or what you see in a wolf, something way past that. And of course, again, that's their interpretation, but I'm not going to sit there and tell them they're full of BS because I wasn't there. I will definitely, listen to them and take that into account because these creatures, like I've said it before, and I'm saying it again, I'm sorry, everyone, but they seem to display a human level intelligence. In that, I totally agree with what you said. That would be totally unsettling. It would be very unsettling to me. And then on the other side, the work side of it, him being a trooper, if he says anything, imagine what they'll do to him right off the bat. The force, they'll laugh and probably, who knows? There's so many things. And then
Especially with a dog, man. They're not
yeah,
gonna. I mean, maybe a Bigfoot. Even then, you might get ridiculed, UFO, whatever. But
yeah,
a dog, when you say a wolf
yeah, something that
entity,
looks like a
creature,
werewolf. Yeah.
whatever, they're not gonna believe you.
Yeah, and then they'll definitely you'll get blackballed, and then that to me, it's not going to make the force look good. So hey, we'll blackball this guy, saying he's got mental issues, and so I can understand why any law enforcement officer will keep quiet about any type of encounters like that they've had, or if they do share their encounters, they want to remain completely and totally anonymous because it is definitely in that profession. It's definitely very very detrimental to their professional career. But
And also, Chris, how are we doing on time for you?
We're doing pretty good. So,
Okay, good. I was just making sure that we're
absolutely.
doing good on the time. I
yeah,
wanted to say something about the like the whole human level intelligence. I really think that everybody that listens to this show gets that aspect of it. I mean, how could you not? But do you remember when Sal, whenever we were talking about when we did the show about the Ouija boards, which hasn't been released yet as of this recording?
right. As of yet,
Do you
yes.
remember that there was like a wolf type?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, we
yeah,
discussed
and
that.
I think that that speaks volumes about what these creatures could be. Like I don't want to tell my wife's story. I'm trying to get her to just come and come and do the show, but her and her sister, and then of course they found a planchette.
Yeah.
They didn't find the Ouija board, but they found the planchette. And I
Hmm.
think that that's I had a story that I just recently I was downtown this past weekend, and I did speak to someone who had told me a story about playing with the Ouija board and then his sister seeing a wolf type entity.
Right.
And so I think that lends credence to the fact that some of these creatures, at least some, are supernatural in that they're like the whole and he's supposed to get with me about the story so that I can relay the story, but it started with them playing with the Ouija board.
I agree
And
with you on that
his little
aspect.
sister, they ended up having something that she was alone in the house. I'm not going to get the whole whatever, but this creature stalked her and came up the stairs. She could hear it walking, and turned the doorknob to open the door to the bathroom where she was hiding. And she caught a glimpse of a tall, shaggy, blackish brown hair, wolf type, like werewolf looking creature that was in the house, in a 2-story house. That this happened when they lived in Sweden.
Oh,
And so, yeah, and so they were playing with a Ouija board, and this is what became of that situation. So, I don't know what to make of that. Like like I said, I'm supposed to talk to him and get the whole gist of it, but that was,
mhm.
it was loud in the bar. You can't, so you're getting like a piece of it, and that it had been told to me partially before. But I'm going to sit down with this individual, and I'm actually going to get all I can from him. Maybe even talk to his sister, who actually still lives over there.
Oh, wow.
But the messed up thing was that it started with a Ouija board, and this thing was turning doorknobs, and it turned off light switches, which if it is a supernatural entity, then automatically you're going to assume that it has a demonic level of intelligence. Now, if
Yes.
you're dealing with what we think of as just a dog man that's running around out in the woods, a wolf man, whatever, this wolf man or wolf woman, whatever you want to call them, they have a human level intelligence. Now, there was a debate last week when we did your show, Chris. I did disagree with you and Armando in the way that I believe that if we're dealing with a flesh and blood dog man, wolf man, creature, whatever, I don't think that they have the same as like level of intelligence as we do. I don't believe that they can drive cars or they would be doing it. I don't believe that they would operate machinery or they would be doing it, checking doorknobs and turning light bulbs and grabbing handles and things. That's something that I've seen dogs do it, like actually not in the way that like maybe they're not real cognizant of what they're doing, but they see humans do it. So they kind of mimic it.
Right.
Like I had a dog that would jump up and try to turn on the light switch. I mean, it was the darndest thing. I mean, he did it like he was a pretty smart dog, and I inherited him from somebody, but I didn't have him that long. But he was a very clever dog, and he had a lot of little quirky things that he could do, and one of them was he would jump and try to turn on light switches. Somebody taught him that, I'm sure,
Yeah.
prior to me getting him, and so he just did it. But Dogman could be doing the same thing if they observe us out in the woods and they see us turning on and off lights and opening doors. Maybe they're doing that, but I do still tend to posable thumb.
Mhm.
I still tend to think that the ones that are of that higher level of intelligence, that there is something possibly supernatural about them. Something, and I don't mean like they're from the hell realm, whatever. I just mean supernatural in the way that it is not the normal natural for us.
Correct.
There is something. Maybe they come from somewhere else, and
There's a spectrum to them. You have to logic dictates you're going to have to apply a spectrum. Not we have dogs, domesticated dogs, and if you put it in a spectrum of dogs from smartest to not the smartest, you're going to have one on each end. And so, Dogman, Sasquatch, all them, you have to put them in that same category.
Yeah, I've had different
Some are
breeds
smarter.
of dogs that were not very intelligent.
Exactly. And so the same thing applies to them. You're going to have some that are not as smart as the others, but then you're going to have ones that are really smart.
Well, here's the interesting thing. Like there are certain species of, if you want to call them different breeds
Yes.
of dogs that I can tell you right now tend to be more intelligent than other breeds.
Correct.
But occasionally you'll get an idiot.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
kidding.
In that bunch. Yes,
yeah, because I had a German Shepherd. Now he had a sister who was very stupid, and I'm not disparaging the German Shepherd breed, but he was smart as a whip.
Mm-hmm.
But a friend of mine, Rock, he got one of the females, and he was like, "This dog is dumb. I mean, it is dumb, like very dumb." And I tried working with him on training her, and it just didn't stick. It just wasn't, she wasn't having it. She was like just kind of all over the place and not able to focus. And I never could figure out what was wrong with that dog.
Well, even in the breeds, brother, you can apply that whole deal about the spectrum within the breed. You're going to have the smartest of that breed, and you're going to have the not so smartest of that breed.
Yeah.
So, it's not just subject to the whole general topic.
It's just that
or
certain
whatever.
breeds, like a lot of people say dachshunds are not
Not that
not
smart.
really intelligent, and I've known one that was smart as a whip, but I've known 3 others that were just very, very ignorant.
Yeah.
Anthony, your dog comes to
Yeah.
mind.
So
My nephew here in the studio, but
so
he
before
had
we
one that was really horrible. He's stupid, and it just would not it refused to learn. And so the point being is that yeah, you're going to have certain ones that
different
are going to
levels
be
of
smarter,
intelligence.
and they'll probably rise up and be leaders.
Yes.
But you're also, I think, as a whole, they are not on the same level of more advanced humans. That's not to say that they're not smarter than some humans, because there's some stupid people out there. Believe me, I've seen some stupid people. I see it every day. I drive around here, see it. But yeah, I do believe that there is a human level of intelligence, but I don't believe that it is
Commonplace across all of them.
no, not at all. I mean, not at all. And I know that I've heard of them doing some pretty stupid things too, like
Yeah.
running out in front of cars. And people, someone made this point to me, Chris, and they wanted to argue with me back and forth on the messenger thing. And I said something about, well, they run out in front. It was on your show, Chris. I said that they run out in front of cars, and somebody said, well, they run out. Somebody sent me a message, and they said they run out in front of cars so that you'll slam on your brakes, and then they can yank you out of the car. And I'm thinking, not me, stupid. I'm gonna just run right over it. I don't care. You think I'm gonna stop for some creature that's gonna run out in front of my car? I mean, some freaking creature's gonna, it's not gonna make me stop. All I know is I'm just going to like hit it and probably keep going. And if it goes through my windshield, well, then whatever happens after that happens. But for the most part, no, I'm not going to slam on my brakes and just wait for Dogman, Goatman, or whatever it is to snatch me up out of my car. That's ignorant. And if that's their plan, then that's not a very well thought out plan, because a lot of times you're hearing these people, like the reports we're getting of like truck drivers driving 18 wheelers. Do you think that they're going to slam on their brakes because some critter runs out in front of them? Heck no, dude. They're going to smack that thing. And so if that's a plan, then that's not a very smart, thought out plan. But this person was persistent about it. And I said, look, okay, if I was a person, being a human being with intelligence, I'm not going to run out in front of a car and try to hope that they stop so that I can maybe try to snatch them out of that car. That's a very ignorant. And this person was obviously, they were just going to argue, and I was like, whatever, I'm not going to sit here and entertain this. But the point being is that, yeah, if that is their level of human intelligence, I don't think we have anything to worry about. But I don't think that that's the height of it, and I don't think that that's what they're doing. I think that that was just a particularly not smart one, and he was running out. And then, of course, you have a guy that was on Brenton's show that observed one that had been hit on the side of the road near Waco.
Yeah, outside of Waco. Outside of Hillsboro.
Hillsboro, yeah. Well, that's going to Dallas,
Going
in
towards
between
Dallas,
Waco and Dallas.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you're sitting there going like, okay, so one of them got hit. Obviously, the plan didn't work very good if that's what they were trying to hope for. I know that I get a lot more reports from people who have this, like you were talking about, the malevolent feeling, Chris. I know that you get a lot more reports of that from creatures like Goatman and these gargoyle type creatures, that people feel that malevolent feeling. So you have both sides. I think there are some people, like, I didn't become physically ill or feel cold or anything like that when I had my encounter. I just thought it was like, this is a weird creature. There's no way to put it into words, really. I don't really remember feeling sick. If I do, I don't really remember it. I don't remember feeling nauseous, but people do. But it tends to be like with the Goatman entity in particular, people feel a very malevolent presence. They feel sick.
Something in the air.
Something in the air, like I've heard electrical, almost. But people report that with Sasquatch too, that it smells horrible, and that they could get nauseous, and that I've heard people say that they hear a crackling type of noise, almost like something in the air, electric.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that with Dogman. Of course, when they stand up, you hear the pop pop noise.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a hip thing or if it's electrical or what that is, but it's giving off some sort of vibe. But like I said, the majority of the encounters, they are brief. They're pretty quick. And but I'm not getting a lot of reports of people just going like, I'm feeling ill, but a lot of these other creatures, people are, in particular, the gargoyle looking creatures, Goatman looking creatures. and occasionally the Dogman creature, but not I just don't hear it as much, like when I've and that's one of the questions I ask people point blank, is like, are you did you feel sick? Because that's something that has come up again and again. Because in the beginning, when I would research and question people, that's not really something I was asking because it didn't happen to me.
Right.
But then as time went on, I would occasionally get a report where someone was like, I've just felt like this horrible sense of dread came over me before I saw it. Now, that could be something instinctual in mankind. Saber-toothed cat is lurking behind you, waiting to snatch you up. You feel that in the back, in your back, your hairs stand up because there's a predator there. That's something instinctual in
That
us.
sixth sense.
Yeah, that's the sixth sense that's telling you, hey, you're about to be eaten, dummy. You better go.
Hmm.
And so you go, climb up a tree or whatever. I don't think you can get away from one of those in a tree, but do whatever take
Do whatever.
cover in some form or another.
Hmm.
But like for the dog man though, what I think is that when these things are snatching people up, which I think it does happen, I don't know that they're the only thing out there doing it, and I guarantee you there's other creatures out there because I've heard of them. But I think they're ambush predators, dude. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
once you spot them, I think that they kind of give it up because sharks will do that too. There's divers that'll, what is it, abalone divers? Like, is that what it's called? Abalone or whatever. They'll dive and they'll see a great white, and they said once it sees you seeing it, then it doesn't have that cover, like because it likes to
The
ambush
element
from
of surprise.
below.
Yeah.
And they said that the only thing you have to worry about at that point is just if it's seeing you head on, it's probably not going to attack.
Hmm.
But when you're making your ascent, I was reading about it,
Hmm.
that they will come up like from below, and they come up and they breach, and they'll
Right.
grab you and smack you back down into the water because that's how they attack.
Right.
So I have a theory that and that I can't really prove because I'm not going to go out and try this, but I will say this, that there is something to that. Like, I think if you see the dog man, then you might be relatively safe, at least in the way that it sees you seeing it. But it's when you don't see it and you just get that feeling of dread like you had, Chris. I think that's when you're most vulnerable because you're like, okay, there's something here. I can't see it, but I can feel it and I know that it's here. And I think that that's when you're closest to being eaten by something, is when you feel that, but you don't see it because the creature knows that you don't see it, and it could be up in a tree.
It's
It
got
could
the
be,
element of
it's
surprise.
got the element of surprise, and it's just waiting for its opportunity to pounce. And I think you're most safe if you're in a group. People that go out hiking in these regions where Bigfoot, Dogman, Goatman have been seen, ignorance is bliss, dude. I mean, I guess they just don't, whatever. I mean, missing 411. What's going on with that? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there's something going on. People go missing all the time.
Yeah. Uh, Chris, I got a question for you.
Yes.
Sorry we digressed. I'm sorry. Now, that former trooper had that experience. Now, you had him, he saw this thing, he locked eyes, the whole nine. What is your take on, law enforcement or anyone like that? What is your take on these incidents happening to them, and what do you think? Do you think it happens a lot more than what people report or less?
I think it happens less. I feel that they do have encounters, but they're not really allowed to specify. There was a case that Jody Cook had mentioned on one of Vic's shows about how a state trooper, or not a state trooper, my apologies, a regular officer in, I
Yes.
think, Kentucky or Ohio, I don't know which state it was, but it was one of the earlier episodes. He had mentioned how there was dash cam footage of this creature breaking one of the windows, and apparently the footage was tampered with. It was taken away from the department. So I believe that there is a huge cover between law enforcement and what they see. I feel some who have seen them tell it anonymously just to get it out there and to know that these things do exist, that yes, the police do know about them. Whereas others could say that it's all just a bunch of BS, but who knows for sure? Because quite frankly, I do believe that they do know. I wouldn't say they don't know because there's definitely a lot of covering up. And if the LBL murders were indeed genuine and not urban legend, then those two responding officers definitely had a very traumatic morning picking up those bodies and looking at them. So that to me, I believe that law enforcement do have a bit of a stretch to it, but I think it's mostly just regular, everyday, average individuals like you, me, and Josh who see them. Well, my case, but you know what I mean. But the whole thing is that like I feel that with these things, when you see them, I know it kind of sounds crazy, but like with things, it's strange because they do have a very mysterious vibe to them, a very weird peak, which does spell out curiosity, but a little bit of confusion, maybe fear,
Yeah,
because these things do. It's hard to really talk about them sometimes because they sound something so much out of fantasy, but it's not a fantasy. This is legitimate cases of apparent peep canines, upright canines
yeah,
being
definitely.
sighted.
Yeah, it's definitely something, you stop and think about it. And if you analyze, well, we're taught certain things from the time we're kids growing up that certain things do not exist, they're fantasy, et cetera, et cetera. So, someone seeing that, some serious cognitive dissonance is going to happen. But, you know, you mentioned the LBL creature. What is your take on that? What type of creature do you think did those horrific things at LBL to those people?
Well, LBL is a very interesting location. It's located the southern eastern portion of Kentucky. It is basically a national recreational park, and in the 80s there was this case where, of course, the this family was brutally torn apart by a beast, and there were two responding officers, and they were quickly escorted out of the area when the apparent feds showed up, and you had National Guard arrive, and that there was apparently a secret military operation to uh, annihilate this creature, and it was going to be a further escalation attack, and it was going to be black boxed apparently.
Right.
And this was told through Jan Thompson's testimony, um, when because she is a resident of well, around the LBL area, and she had gotten that testimony, and it was collected by Barton Nunnally, who the infamous illustrator of the LBL Beast, which is a pretty good sketch, by the way, folks. Um, if I already mentioned that, but anyways, um, the the thing is that with these murders, I keep hearing different variations of the story. Jody Cook has told different variations. There's also been variations discussed from a few other researchers. I know Kumbo has put his 2 cents into LBL, and it's a pretty, I wouldn't say it's hectic, but all the testimonies that you hear, for me personally, it's hard to really see what's what. I always stick to what was first said, but then you hear difference, and then it just escalates and it turns into different of theory and discussion because someone else adds to it, and then there's resource. But that's the other thing too. Is there a resource that verifies that this indeed happened the way it did? Now, with the LBL murders, I mean, there's no intel besides what's been told. There's no coroner's reports, there's no photographic evidence of the location of the deaths, there's no autopsy reports, there's nothing. And it's a shame because now you have a whole bunch of family members, if this indeed happened, that don't even know what happened to their family that day. That, yeah, it was a bear attack, reportedly told by them, most likely 9 times out of 10. But then you have to worry about, well, how does a bear brutally maul someone like that? But in that case, it could be perfectly covered up because of the fact of how bears can easily slaughter and tear up people as well. But dogmen, the way they do it too, is very mysterious. Now, with the LBL murders, I believe that there was a story, or at least a case that took place there involving that, and that it did happen. But it's very hard to say for sure with all these constant additions of different testimony. And that's where it really gets out of place because there's also the case of the Bowman that was brutally murdered, and that was told in Kumbo's perspective. He had went out to LBL with a group of people and discussed the case, as well as there was a case Jody Cook talked about, a couple that were brutally killed by a dogman, and a fisherman saw it from the canoe,
Oh yeah.
and that's a very interesting perspective because now you have two parties witnessing, one witnessing death and another's witnessing the trauma and the PTSD of witnessing someone's death. And that right there in that case is a very terrifying situation, but there's just so much in LBL, and plus LBL has ghost Indian burial grounds, the vampire hotel known as the Hotel California. There's so much. It's like the Pine Barrens, and it's a very tough place to really get it narrowed down to. But I feel that whatever had killed this family, and this is something I think you would agree with me with, Josh, and possibly you, Sal, is I feel that whatever killed this family was supernatural.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I know that from what I remember hearing about it, that there was a child that was impaled on a branch
Yeah, up in a tree
Yes.
about
Yep.
on a
20 feet up.
tree. Oh my
20
Yeah,
gosh.
feet up, blood dripping on the sheriff's hat,
yeah.
apparently.
I would not discount the paranormal aspect at all with this case, just because if there had been or has been paranormal activity documented in and around that area, well then you can't throw that out. And of course, when going back to the physical aspect of it, I wouldn't throw that out, or I would not, excuse me, throw the possibility of a Sasquatch out there, but I'd be more inclined to gravitate to the whole Dogman being the culprit because of the viciousness of how I've heard the story, and I've heard Kumbo tell the story, and I've heard other sources tell the story, and just the whole viciousness involved in how these people were just decimated, and then a child, and then way up in that tree. Yeah, to me, I would judge. When you compare the two, I think the dog man can be a lot more vicious and just nasty all around than a Sasquatch. That's just my opinion. That's because it's got the claws, it's got all those tools that it brings to the fight, that tearing a person up. Hey, this is like making paper mache. It's that easy. Whereas the Sasquatch would probably be more dependent on just complete and total overwhelming brute strength.
And I agree 100% with that. And personally, when you look at the backstory of the LBL beast, you hear of this black magic, the supernatural of a shaman who had used his powers for the sake of negativity and evil and manifested the murders of thousands of people in the area and regions. And of course, that's when the military had gotten involved at that time and they had killed him, and he was a creature. And it's believed that this LBL beast is that shaman, and it's under the curse of black magic, or at least something of that. And it's truly a very interesting case, but it's also very terrifying and confusing.
Yeah, wow, it's hard to really wrap your head around it because, like you said, it's terrifying. And then if you look at it through the lens of just the physical flesh and blood creature, it can't be just there can't be just one roaming all of the LBL. That common sense dictates there has to be a lot more, and they're probably still in and around there, staying hidden because they probably witnessed what happened to that particular one of their pack, if you will. That's
There's
just my take on it.
also, oh, my apologies, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good, brother.
I was going to say that there's also certain parts of the park that are closed off for unknown reasons. There was a researcher who wanted to go out there himself, and they restrict guns. Guns are very strict over there. They will not You will not be available to enter the property or premises with a weapon. And there's parts of the park that are closed off and there's no explanation. Some believe that it's because of maintenance, others believe that there's more to it. I believe it's more along the lines that there's another operation, maybe another one of these creatures, there's some sort of breakdown. But it's something to really think about in the terms of cryptozoology, really.
Yeah, I would agree with you as far as the closing down maintenance. They close parts of the park off, and if they've had them closed, for a long time, I would agree that using the word maintenance, or saying maintenance reasons would be convenient enough because potentially that could be, where they have it closed off at. It's kind of one of those things, you hear about with the Sasquatch, the big X's and stuff. Don't go past this point, otherwise you're taking your chances, for lack of better words. I think those areas where they close off and where people see them, it's a territorial marker, for us, but using maintenance as the cover, maintenance reasons as a cover is a good way to keep people out of there, because people, it's a park. We're going to run the whole park if we can. And of course, Dogman and or Sasquatch, whatever, they don't adhere to that. They set their territory and that's how it goes. So yeah, and along with what you're saying, all of those factors, operations going on in those closed off areas to maybe keep them in line, or keep them out of the area, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, I would also, I wouldn't throw that one out of the realm of possibility at all.
Hey, Chris, I wanted to share a story with you.
Sure.
I got this story from a listener who he said this happened in Cahokia, Illinois, and he said it was back in the '90s. He was a kid. I think he was like a teenager. Anyways, he and a friend, and he said he wanted to tell me and Sal this story. He said that he and a friend were hanging out one night in their bedroom. And I guess he was sleeping over or something, and they were getting ready to go to sleep, and they were talking, and they heard screeching tires outside across the street. So they looked at each other, and they were like, "What the heck is that?" And they both looked out the window of the room, and they saw a vehicle with a guy and a girl. The guy got out of it and started walking down the sidewalk towards what looked like a dog to him and his friend. But whatever it was, it jumped up and attacked the guy when he got close. And while the guy was being attacked, the lady in the vehicle was screaming bloody murder. So the guy tried to shake this dog thing, the way he described it was dog-like thing, off of his arm. He managed to do it, and now the guy is backing away from the thing, and it made another lunge at him. And as it did, it jumped. Now, at this point, he said that time seemed to slow down and that this dog-like creature seemed to shimmer and change. He said the next thing I remember was seeing the dog-like creature now on 2 feet and looking like a man. It caught up to the guy as he was backing away, and then there was a struggle for what seemed like a minute, but it might have been shorter. Anyway, they were fighting in the shadow of a huge tree, and it was hard to see anything other than the movement. So they were fighting, and whatever it was must have hit or pushed the guy with a considerable amount of force, because the guy flew back about 4 or 5 feet and landed in a sitting position and kind of skidded to a halt and was looking at the thing, but it didn't seem to want to come out of the shadows. It didn't chase him, and it was close to the vehicle, and the guy got up, got into the vehicle, and then peeled out. He said, "Me and my friend watched for a minute but the way he wrote it, I couldn't really understand. It says afterwards, but nothing ever came out. And I don't know about my friend, but I really don't want to keep looking, because I had a sense that I shouldn't tell anyone about this or that it would find me." But he said he finally told, as he was a little bit older. He said it happened when he was 14 or 15. Okay. He said that he told his girlfriend when he was 20, but he said the year was 94 or 95. That's a weird story. And like, this guy, he sent me this story, and he left me a number where I could call him and talk to him. But what do you make of that? Because like, this is not that kind of story is not a rare story. I probably got 3 or 4 more like that. There was another one, a lady, which weird and oddly enough happened in Illinois too. It was in Peoria, I believe. And this was through someone who is an absolute non-believer in any of this stuff. He gave me this story because it was his aunt's friend, and she told me this. He says, my aunt's got a crazy friend who saw some stuff. Well, when I spoke to this person, she didn't seem crazy to me. She wasn't having anything paranormal or anything weird happening. She didn't really seem to be much of a believer herself. I think that the guy that told me that, he just thinks anybody who believes like we do is crazy. But he said, he goes, "I can get you in touch with my aunt." So the aunt got me in touch with this lady who was actually her neighbor. And the aunt had something kind of weird to say too, that she actually did witness something walking through her backyard, because for whatever reason, this neighbor and her backyard, the fence was gone between the 2 yards. So it was like just the 2 yards were fenced in.
One big yard.
Yeah, one big yard, and they'd lived next to each other for 20 years. But this woman claimed that she saw, it's going to sound weird. She saw a naked man eating fruit in the backyard. I guess it was pears or something. And that she said that the next thing she saw was a giant wolf standing on all fours at the back door, and that it was growling at her. And it was like she had missing time. It was like it was daylight when she saw the guy,
Hmm.
but then it was like dark, and there was a wolf there. And she said that it was almost like she was dreaming it, but she knew she wasn't. She knew it was real, and that this thing was basically telling her to let it in to the house. And she said that it was almost like I wanted to let it in because it was like almost like just let me in, let me in. And it kept saying that it was hungry. And she was like, no, I'm not going to let you in. So then it became more aggressive and began to paw at the glass, and she fell asleep, which is why she knew that it wasn't a dream, because then she woke up and it was daylight. And for a split second, she thought she saw what she thought was a wolf walking on two legs out the front door. So, what are you to make of these types of incidents or
Reports.
stories, reports? Yeah, like what do we make of this? Like, and here's the story right here. If you want to read it, Mondo. It's just very bizarre. You know, you get these stories, you get them all the time, and and Chris, I would say this: if I was like a non-believer and one person came to me and told me that story, I would look at them and think they were an absolute lunatic. And I would tell them you're off your meds, or you need to be on meds, or you need to go and do something. You know what I mean? But I don't. I know that I am a believer, and I know that I get more than one story like this. I get multiple stories with these same threads. Here's another one. Just a real brief one. I haven't gotten back with this person, so I can't give you the whole rundown of it. Guy and his girlfriend were at a stoplight. This happened in Ohio, and he said, I think it was in Columbus or something like that. And this is very very weird. They look over, okay, and they see in the car next to them what they thought was a dog in the back seat barking and freaking out. And there was a guy that was driving. The guy that was driving the car, they said, looked almost like he was, for lack of a better word, a zombie, because that's my words, because they said he looked almost like he was fake. And they said that his eyes looked completely blacked out, like he didn't. It was so weird. He looked over at them, and like he had no teeth. It was just like a mouth and the eyes, and it was almost like a, I don't know the way you would describe it, but anyway, they said there was this big hairy thing barking and snapping in the back seat, and that an arm, a hairy, shaggy arm with black nails, came out of the window as it rolled down and began to reach for the outside door latch. And then they saw the giant head of what was a grayish white wolf-like creature in the back seat that was trying to get out of the car. That's weird. And then they had a friend with them that was in the back seat of their vehicle, okay, and they said, hey, we can get you in touch with this guy. Well, I haven't reached out to him yet. I'm so backed up on these stories. But the story was just like weird to me. Like, what is that? What was that? The car just burned off when the light turned green, and luckily whatever was in the back seat did not get out and assault them, which it seemed like it wanted to. And all the way down the road, they just kind of sat there. They didn't. It was in the middle of the night. There was no other vehicles around. They just sat there and watched this thing drive away. And thank goodness that it whatever was in the back seat did not get out and attack them. But what is to make of that? I mean, I have talked to the guy and the girl like in correspondence, but I haven't talked to the third person. And I would think that that story is just another lunatic story, but you get like this same like sort of weird threads with these wolf type entities, which is obviously very supernatural in some way or another. Like what is to be made of these stories? I mean, like what can you? The only reason I would even entertain a story that sounds like that is because I have another one and I'll tell you real briefly. It was in I believe, a Safeway parking lot, like, and this happened, I think, in like Washington, that someone saw a dog-like creature in the back seat of a car as they were getting into their vehicle in broad daylight, and this thing was scratching and clawing, and it looked like it had a chain on it, like it was chained to the floorboard, and it was small. They said it wasn't real big, but it had arms. Like the front legs of what this should have been a dog's legs were like arms, but furry. And it was snapping and barking. in the back seat, and they were like, "What is that?" You know, the size of, like, if you stretched it out, it would be the size of a large dog, the way that they were describing it to me, or a young teenage child. What is to be made of that?
I got something for you, Wolf. Go ahead, Chris. I don't mean to interrupt, but I got something for you along those lines. So hold the thought, Chris. What do you think, brother?
Well, with all the stories you talked about, I mean, the first one, like you have reports of you don't really get a lot of reports of dogman attacks, and if this is indeed a dogman that attacked this individual, then definitely we're dealing with something that was definitely not natural to me. It doesn't sound natural. The reason why is because if this thing at first was like a regular dog and then it gets up on its hind legs, I mean, you would think it would have already been bipedal if it was a. But then again, too, it could also. They've also been claimed to be run on all fours. I've collected stories with them, so I guess it can work both ways. But I guess just the way the story was discussed, it sounds like it wasn't a natural creature. And then with the second story, that's definitely supernatural. A skinwalker, most likely. It just sounds very, very frightening in a sense, and I would think it'd be a skinwalker. I think that story is just too, it's embellished. And then you have the dog in the back, and then the zombie looking individual, which is a good term to call it because it's frightening. But this case of you, there have been very few reports of where people have claimed to seen them in back seats, an unknown certainty of whomever it is of why they're back there or what look like to be dogmen. But if that is the case, that's a very frightening case, and it must have had to have taken place sometime in the late hours because I wouldn't think of a vehicle like that to carry something that isn't a dog or a wolf even in the back.
Mm-mm, no, this was in the middle of the night.
That's really odd.
Well,
All that stuff.
hold on one second though. The story with the lady, it was like I said, it's not only one to say he's my friend, but a guy I know that was his aunt, and then her neighbor having these experiences. It was also like Native Americans tend to be, the skinwalker tends to be a Native American. This was a white guy, according to them. It was a white male that was in the back eating, and I've
Fully
actually
naked,
fully
fully
naked,
naked.
yeah. And I remember hearing a story of what they thought was a wolf type creature on two legs eating out of an orchard too. I mean, eating fruit. So I mean, that was all that, and that's all they saw, but not in that particular story. But in another story, it was eating apples. What I thought was just weird because most you wouldn't think of like a canine type. That would have to be a human aspect there to eat fruit like that.
Yeah. Well, some animals, i.e., canines, will eat certain
Yeah,
fruits,
absolutely.
but it's not something that's common. So, that one throws that one up in the air. But the thing I was going to, I told you to hold a thought real quick. And Chris, I want you to, let me know what you think about this. But before I get into that real quick, after reading that new story you just got, Wolf, the gentleman said that the location of this, where they saw this particular incident with the guy stepping out of the car and
Which
that dog,
one?
the one you just
Oh,
told
the
about,
Cahokia?
yeah, Cahokia. He said that in the story, the gentleman mentioned that it's about 30, 40 miles from the mounds that are in Illinois,
Yeah.
the big snake mounds. A lot of Native American lore around those mounds, and a lot of supernatural aspects are attributed to that area where those mounds are. So this happening, yeah, I would lean to the side of sounding supernatural.
Mm.
So, it's, yeah, I wouldn't discount it just to say, what do you make of it? Of course, the guy said it was kind of shimmering, and then next thing you know, it's on two legs. So the thing I wanted to talk about real quick is that my cousin, I have a cousin who lives out in East Texas. He had a friend who's no longer with us. He's deceased now. He died in a house fire. But this guy had the story that goes with that is he'd been out hunting, and I think he was hunting hogs or coyotes or something out there in, I believe it was somewhere around Sam Rayburn Lake, which is in the middle of Angelina National Forest, and that he came upon this weird looking, my cousin told me it was like a I don't know, coyote wolf. It was a canid, just for sake of argument, it was some type of canid that he knew it wasn't a coyote and all the stuff, and he came up on it. And make the long story short, this thing noticed him after he'd been there watching it, so it turned on him and it came at him, so he shot it and killed it, and took a picture of it in the whole 9 yards. And according to my cousin, that picture made the front page of the local paper because it was so weird. And my cousin, I saw him a few weeks ago, and he told me, he goes, the guy had told him, the guy who's now deceased, told him that it didn't have front paws, it had like hands. And so, it attacked him, he shot it, killed it, but it wasn't real big. It was probably, a little bit bigger than a coyote, probably about the size of about a 90 to 100-pound dog, and he shot it and killed it.
A pup.
Yeah,
Probably
sounds like a Dogman pup.
Dogman pup.
Yeah, it sounds like a very young juvenile. And so, what do you make of that? What's your take on
Couldn't be a
that?
Dogman because Dogmen don't attack people.
What do you make of that, Chris?
Yeah, I gotta agree with Josh. Dogmen don't attack people.
You guys.
It's
Oh man.
it's a very yeah, that's a very interesting case. It's very terrifying. I feel with that case, and of course I do apologize. I mean, well, my condolences to that deceased individual, by the way. Um, when you got a case like that of very frightening circumstances, you really, it's hard to explain in a sense, because this is stuff that to average people don't really know too much about, because it's not in their curriculum. It's not what you would expect. So to see this and have it unfold the way it did, very unnatural experience, if you ask me. Like it sounds it in a very big sense.
I was taken aback whenever he expressed to me, he goes, it had hands. That's what my friend told me, that it had hands, not paws on the front. And so,
Sam Houston National Forest.
No.
No, I'm saying like the story about the Sam Houston National Forest, where me and Nellie, my wife, when we talked to the guy at the housing place where we were working. You remember I
Yes.
told you that? You came out there to visit us. And
Yes.
this guy is actually a manager of a business out here, and his brother claimed to have had very similar thing, came out on the trail, stood there and debated about whether it was going to attack him or not, and he felt like it was going to attack him. And of course, it had hand-looking appendages. Yeah, it had hands on the front, not paws. And he said it had hands. It didn't go up all the way, though. He said it kind of sat up and then went back down on all fours and then ran into the woods. And he, of course, turned around and went right back in. According to him, he'd only been walking for 15 minutes into one of the main arteries of the forest.
Yeah, there's a lot of trails out there that people walk, and
this was a main one. I mean, this wasn't like very far in. I mean,
Oh.
he saw this Dogman looking creature, and his brother told me and my wife that
well,
story.
it's not surprising, brother, because I know you've seen some thick woods out there. I know you've been out through that area, and it's thick. It's thick. That's just an example of what East Texas is like.
You don't have to go to
Chris.
East Texas. Go to Rockdale.
Yeah, you can go out to
What
Rockdale.
is Rockdale, like 45 miles from here? And it's
Yeah,
thick
it's
woods
thick.
out there.
Different type of trees, mainly like you said, oak, and a lot of big cedars. I mean, cedars big enough that you could hide, a small house behind one of those cedars.
There's a lot
You
more
would never
oak,
see
though,
it.
out there than cedar. Cedar's
Yeah.
more over here, but there is some
And it's thick,
real thick woods.
different kind of thick, but it is thick out there. So,
So, Chris, I know it's time to wrap it up for you. It was good. We had a really good session here. I know we could probably
Seriously, yeah,
we
absolutely.
could keep talking all night, and I know that we try to let you get a word in edgewise. I know me and Armando always have something to say, and you are good at what you do. Like I said, we will continue, folks, to build this relationship we have with Chris and share knowledge and information. I would like to make it a regular thing to come back and continue to share back and forth, and what we can do to help one another. Because it seems like when we kind of feel like we answer a question, we seem to get two more to pop up.
yeah, that's definitely what happens. And I'm just glad that we're in touch with you and we're in contact with you, and we've built this relationship, Chris, that we can share information back and forth, because I'm a lot, I guess you could say, I'm in the same camp in many ways that you are. I want to find out all I can, because
Yeah.
this is anomalous. Too many people out there reporting it. So I've got to find out about this, just because I've got to, in my family, there's a lot of hunters in my family, and
Yeah, mine too, both sides.
and that's something that they need to know about. And as much information I can gather and impart on them, I am definitely, go down that route and make it a point to do that, so I can inform them.
Well, there's more than just hogs and deer out there.
Oh,
I'll
yes.
tell you that.
That's true. Oh my God, this has been a good one, man. I tell you. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being with us this evening, and we look forward to the next time, because I'm sure you're gonna have a lot more encounters and reports from people, from up there in the New England area where you're at.
Definitely. I want to thank you guys again for taking the opportunity to sit down and talk with me. And of course, to everyone listening in, I hope you enjoyed the show and that the data and discussion was intelligent enough. And as always, you guys do a fantastic job. So please keep up the great work.
Yeah, and we definitely
Likewise,
want you back.
Chris. Yeah, likewise. We want you back. And just remember, folks, Chris's channel is The Venomous Fringe. Go
Venomous
check it out. He's
Fringe.
got a
That's
lot of good
awesome.
information there. If you're Dogman aficionados, that's the place to go, right there, along with Vic's Dogman Encounters. You got your choice, what you want to hear. And us, we're on the Paranormal Round Table. You want to send us your stories, daswolfman88@gmail.com. And if you like, or whatever you choose, Wolf and Sal. wolfandsal@gmail.com. Definitely send us your stories. We'll tell them for you. You don't want to tell them, that's fine. We're
Or
okay
you can,
with
or
it.
if you want to get in touch with us and come on the show, we're open to that too. I'm definitely open to, if somebody is willing and capable to come on and talk about it, then that's definitely preferred. I would rather do that than me tell it than myself. But if you can't do it, I'll tell it. I mean, I'll tell you the best I can. You know what I mean?
Definitely. So with that being said, brother, I think we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Y'all have a good night. Chris, thank you again for being with us.
Thank you guys. Have a terrific evening.
You too.